With the action from the Champion of Champions done and dusted for another year, let's take a look at 5 things that we learned from last week's tournament. And first isn't so much something that we learnt, but something that has been reinforced, and that is my prediction powers when it comes to snooker. Well, they aren't fantastic. Only one of the 4 players that I predicted to reach the semi-finals actually went on to do so, and that was Neil Robertson. I also suggested that I felt like Mark Allen was the most likely to go on and win the title, and he lost 4-0 in the first round. And then I predicted Mark Selby to lose first round, and he went on to win the entire tournament. So if anyone watching this video goes on to watch my UK Championship preview in a couple of weeks, then my advice would be to bet against all of my predictions at that point, and you will probably make a healthy profit. And speaking of the UK Championship, that leads me into a bit of a segue here, and that is to say, if any of you snooker fans watching this video are new to the channel or haven't yet subscribed, now is the time to do so, as I will have content lined up over the next couple of weeks in preparation for the qualifiers for the UK Championship and then the main event. And then learning point number 2 from last week is that these matchroom shirts really don't work, do they? Now, I am all for the idea that not every single tournament played in the season requires a waistcoat and a bow tie, and the matchroom events have, over the past couple of seasons, really tried to modernise the dress code for their tournaments, but these did not look good at all. Most of the shirts didn't look like they even fit the players particularly well, and don't even get me started on this quarter zip style they had for absolutely zero reason. You know, I've heard players complain about bow ties getting in the way of their cue. Well, I mean, what does a quarter zip do that sort of alleviates that frustration? Like, I do see what they are trying to do, and again, it's not the first time we've seen these shirts, but having quarter zips which don't look great, and the shirts are also plastered in sponsorships, it just really isn't my cup of tea at all. And honestly, I much prefer what we see in the Home Nations series, where the players are just wearing simple black shirts without the need for a waistcoat to match. But you know, you might feel completely different and you may like these shirts. And of course, Mark Allen is making full use of the opportunity to donate his shirt to a fan for charity. But when it's on my TV screen, I don't know, they just look a bit tacky. Shaun Murphy also kicked up a bit of a fuss at the tournament directors about the scheduling of the tournament after he was playing 1 PM on Monday after he had been playing out in China the Thursday before, citing that there were other players who weren't even playing in China who will be playing later in the week. Now, if I take a look at defending the tournament organisers to begin with, every player who was in the latter stages in China had a 4-day rest period before playing in Leicester. For example, Murphy played on Thursday in China, then Monday last week. Sao Sing Tong played on Friday and then Tuesday last week. Stephen Maguire played on Saturday and then Wednesday. And then finally Higgins, who got to the final on Sunday, played again on Thursday. So the tournament organisers really couldn't have made it much fairer than that. But I do think there is a better point behind Murphy's rant, which isn't personal to him, but rather the entire tour. And that is that scheduling a huge tournament in the UK to begin just 1 day after another huge tournament in China finishes is always going to create problems. Again, this isn't anything new, and the season has pretty much always played out this way. But should World Snooker and Matchroom Sport be considering changing this? Now, as a complete armchair viewer with absolutely zero knowledge of how to run a sport, I'm sure what I'm suggesting is a lot easier said than done, but I do think there is scope to change the scheduling of a snooker season to avoid these kind of conflicts. Looking even deeper into this season already, you will see that there have been 4 tournaments in China, most of which have been sandwiched between tournaments back in the UK. So I do beg the question of whether there is a way that you can have most of the Chinese events played in or around the same time in a season, which would save players having to travel back and forth on numerous occasions, and this is frequently done with little turnaround. Now, Murphy did also mention that he wasn't made aware of the fact that he was first on at 1 PM until he was eating breakfast on the morning of his match, which, if that is true, is something the tournament should be correctly slated for. Ultimately though, I think there is an argument to be made about the scheduling problems, but I think the point Murphy made about being treated unfairly is probably a little bit unjust in the grand scheme of things. Judd Trump became the first man this season to have not won a title despite reaching multiple finals after losing out to Mark Selby last night. The main takeaway for Judd, however, is the problems he is having with his cue, which he has only just recently changed. I believe he is also now using a titanium ferrule rather than the brass one which most players use, which he also does seem to be struggling with. But after getting through his group on Monday with wins over Bayu Liu and Li Paifan, he suggested that he'd be changing his cue again before the UK Championship. And I did think Judd looked a little bit disinterested during his group matches on Monday, but it was perhaps instead just a complete lack of faith in his own cue going into the tournament, which is just about as bad of a problem as you can have as a snooker player. Interestingly though, he also done an interview with ITV before the event even started, where he said that he still thinks his game is in good shape, and the only reason he hasn't won a title yet is because other players are playing incredibly well to beat him. So you would suggest that if he can get his cue issues sorted, then he may start to turn around this form. Still though, to reach 2 finals within a month whilst playing with a cue you're not happy with is a testament to how difficult this guy is to beat. His defeat last night also means Judd has only won 1 of the 6 Champion of Champions finals he has reached. So on one hand, you have to credit his remarkable consistency in the tournament, but that is a pretty disappointing return. And then finally, the main talking point of last week was just how well Mark Selby played to capture his first Champion of Champions title. Just like Judd, he has played at every edition of this tournament since it started back in 2013, and this was actually the first time he had gone on to reach a final. But this was some of the best stuff we have seen from Mark Selby in a long while, and it was the kind of performance we used to see from him when he was routinely winning Triple Crown events and was the world number 1 sort of 5-10 years ago. He just had that ability to win any type of frame that was presented to him during the entire tournament. He was cueing well enough to score heavily, highlighted by the 4 centuries he made in the final, 3 of which came in the final 3 frames. But he also had that trademark Mark Selby self in winning lengthy, scrappier frames too. He won a 60-odd minute frame in his semi-final, and then got the better of a key 12th frame in the final as well. And I have mentioned before already that Mark Selby has been one of the most consistent players this season. Before last week, he had reached 3 semi-finals and also a further quarter-final. So the only disappointment for him so far was that he wasn't converting any of these performances into titles yet this season. He had also mentioned a frustration with himself where he felt like his performances were too up and down and he was struggling to find that needed consistency. But he certainly found that last week. He swept aside Maguire, Robertson and Trump and showed his fighting qualities to get past Mark Williams in a deciding frame. Now, I did make the mistake last season of being really confident that Selby would have a good World Championship after he won the Welsh Open, only to see him lose first round in Sheffield, so I hesitate to say the same thing here going into UK Championship. But last week was a reminder of the fact that this man is one of the best match players the sport has ever seen, and there are definitely positives to take for both him and his fans going forwards. He hasn't won a Triple Crown event since 2021, so maybe this season is when he changes that.